Wow. Honoring, respecting, loving, obeying parents. For some, this may be easy. You have good parents. You grew up well. It's not perfect, but you grew up well. But for others, like we said, it is hard. You look at me and you say, "What you talking about, Willis? I cannot do this." You mean God says He wants me to look at my parents with this kind of weight? And if I don't, it puts me in a category with all these other sinners and all this other sin. What do? I want you to think about the process of a child and a parent. As a small child, and as a child grows up, honor begins with learning to obey your parents, doesn't it? At our youngest ages, we are called to obey our parents. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1 says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right." I can't tell you how many times Sharon and I told our kids that. Obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Colossians 3:20 says, "Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord." There are some things that a child just doesn't understand, right? That's why it's important to submit to their parents' wisdom. One summer evening, there was a violent thunderstorm. The little boy was in his bed, and his mom was there tucking him in. It was thundering, and it was lightning, and it was scary. She was about to turn off the light when a little tremor of a voice spoke up to Mommy and said, "Mommy, will you sleep with me tonight?" And the mother smiled, and she gave him a reassuring hug, and she said, "I can't, dear. I have to sleep with your daddy." And a long silence was broken at last by his little shaky voice, and he said, "The big sissy." See, there are a lot of things that children just don't understand, but children are called to obey their parents anyway. Now, there's stipulations on that. In that passage in Colossians, after it says for children to obey, it also gives stipulations for parents if you were to go on and read in Colossians. It says fathers, don't provoke your children. It gives all these things that parents are supposed to do. But most of us would not be here today if we hadn't obeyed our parents. We would have ran out in front of a car in a parking lot. We would have drank paint thinner. We would have done something. We'd end up running with the wrong crowd, whatever. Children are supposed to obey their parents. Parents, just let me say, kids are not equal friends. They are your kids, and parents need to be parents, and parents need to raise their kids. And don't misunderstand me. I'm not talking about redneck terrible parenting here. I'm not talking about a child obeying a parent when a parent is forcing or telling a kid to do something that's sinful. That's not what God's talking about when He says for children to honor their parents. It's not a kid has to obey if his parents telling him to go into the bank and rob the bank for him. We're not talking about a mom making her child perform some indecent act for money. We're not talking about a dad or a mom forcing something that is ungodly. We're not talking about abuse. That's a whole different thing. But in the things that are right, the Scripture says for children to obey their parents. God's talking about when parents care. When it's don't do this for your protection. When it's don't treat your sister poorly because God made her. When it's work hard, don't be lazy. When it's give your best. When it's quit acting up or I am going to tan your hide. That's the kind of things that are good. But then life kind of changes as you grow up and you become an adult, doesn't it? As a young adult, when you're out from under your parents' roof, you move from obedience to appreciation. Or you should. That's the way God wants it to be. Proverbs 6:20-22 says, "My son, obey your father's commands and don't neglect your mother's teaching. Keep their words always in your heart. Tie them around your neck. Wherever you walk, their counsel can lead you. When you sleep, they will protect you. When you wake up in the morning, they will advise you." The best way for adults to honor their parents is to pattern their lives after the best that your parents had to offer. If there are bad things you need to discard, then discard that, but honor the things that were good. And I understand in a room this size, there's going to be 320, 330 varying degrees of that. It's usually when you hit adulthood that you begin to appreciate all that your parents have done. One organization estimates the cost of raising a single child to the age of 18 is $200,000, and that does not include inflation or paying for college. Do you think parents could use that money for other things? You're darn right they could. Somebody has said that a parent's a person who carries pictures where they once carried money. As an adult, I have to be careful with this when my parents are in here this morning. As an adult, do I still have to obey my parents? No. In fact, I'll say this. If you have your own family, you don't need to. Sometimes the worst thing for a marriage is still to cling to mama or daddy too much and not cling to your spouse. You left father and mother, and they wanted you to. And you started your own household. So you don't have to obey your parents, but you need to respect them and take the good and realize that they may, not in every instance, I understand that in some situations things are not good, but in a lot of instances, you may need to take what they say and listen to it sometimes. They may know some things that you need to hear, some things you haven't been through. So if you're 32, I'm not talking about my dad because I'm 40, I'm a man. But if you're 32 and your dad comes over and says your yard needs cutting, you don't have to mow it, but he may be right. It may be full of weeds and you may need to. Or if your mom or your mother-in-law comes over and she criticizes your cooking, don't put X-lax in the stuff on purpose. Don't burn the rolls on purpose just to spite her. She may be right. You just really may not be that good of a cook. If you have your own household, you don't have to obey, but I will say this, if you are still living under your parents' roof, then you're on their ground. As long as you're living at home, you're saying, I am willing to obey. So some of you who are 32 and you're still at home and you're wondering why your mama asked you to take out the garbage, it may be time for you to get an apartment. You might need to consider moving out. For a child at home who has not left mother and father, to disobey is to neglect authority. There's a promise there. If a child honors his parents, then the child's days will be long in the land that God has given him. When I honor my parents, then God brings blessings to me. That doesn't mean a check's going to show up in the mail next week. That's not what he's talking about. But when children honor their parents, then by and large, life goes better. And that goes for full-grown adults too. And some of us are full-grown. We need to exercise more. I'm the furthest thing, I promise you this, I'm the furthest thing from being a perfect dad. So I'm not trying to stand up here and tell you that I've got it all figured out. Just ask my kids. But I know this in my heart. I love my kids. And right or wrong, when I tell them to do something or to not do something, it's because I love them and I want to protect them from something or provide them with something of value to them. My children and your children too, I bet, have gone through pain in their lives that they could have avoided or we could have avoided if we had listened to mama or daddy. Sometimes it was tail end pain, wasn't it? But we've been there. I've gone through pain in my life that I could have avoided if I had listened to my parents. I got spanked with a tree one time because I didn't listen to my dad. It seemed like a tree. He told us not to cut across the pasture. I was with my cousin, and we said, hey, it'll be quicker to get back to your house if we cut through the pasture. Well, Daddy told me not to. Oh, come on, let's just do it. Cut through the pasture. He had gotten a new bull, wasn't used to it, and he was afraid that it might charge us or hurt us, kill us. We topped that hill, and Dad saw us going right where he told us not to, and he looked like the Incredible Hulk. I mean, it was a and he pulls this tree, was a small tree he planted, pulls the tree out of the ground. It's got roots. It's got a ball of roots on it, and he's whipping us across the. I ran into my cousin last week at the downtown grill. I said, "Do you remember when he whipped us with that tree?" He said, "I'll never forget it, and he's not even my dad." Listen. And you may be here this morning. Listen, some of you right here, y'all are teenagers, right? And that's a whole different world right there. But listen, you're thinking, here's the bottom line. Some of you are thinking, my mom and dad don't know squat. Your mom and dad brought you into this world. Your mom came as close to death as someone can come to death to give you life. And it may not be true in every circumstance. I understand that. But by and large, for the most part, the vast majority of cases, when your parents tell you something or instruct you, it's because they love you, because they care, because they want to protect you, they want to provide for you. Some circumstances are not like that, and I understand that. Parents have lived a portion of life that their kids haven't lived yet. By and large, parents are trying to help. Now, what if you have a bad relationship with a parent? What do? There's only one simple answer. You have to get to a point where you can show them grace, whether they deserve it or not. Do you know what grace is? Grace is giving someone something that they do not deserve. Many times that includes forgiveness. In granting them grace and forgiveness, you discover that it becomes a blessing to you. You may just simply need to do that for you. Here's how. Sometimes when I get hurt and I don't give grace and I don't forgive, then I become bitter. And bitterness has a way of taking root and showing up in every relationship in life. I'm hurt, I'm angry, I don't want to show grace, I don't want to show love. Then it spills over to those that I care about the most. I become unforgiving and angry at other people. I become unforgiving and angry at my spouse, at my children. And it becomes this growing cycle of reciprocation. And soon you find yourself becoming everything that you didn't want to become, like Paul talked about in Romans chapter 7.